Jordan and Gretzky, Serena and Ruth. Remembering great ones is easy to do. But what about the no-names who spent their whole lives long snapping footballs and catching sack flies? They're guys, remember that guy. Remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy. They're just gonna remember some guys now.
Hurts has time, now locates Barkley in the backfield. Barkley slips 2 tackles and picks up the first down, jumping in the air. To remember that guy, the show where we mine our memories for nuggets of nostalgia about peripheral players, past and present. Hey there, folks. Me, James, ready to tackle another episode head on, and I am positively jumping with joy because of who I get to do that with.
Well, there's one process I do trust, and we're going to do a 180, and we're going to jump right over backwards. Diaz, back with you once again. It's another season. But we have a very special guest for this one. We've never heard from him before. He is some guy. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, it's the alternate version of Xavier that was a Giants fan who didn't pick the Jets just to go against his father and feels really, really, really terrible about that Saquon Barkley deal.
Hey, maybe Daniel Jones can play for the Jets.
Apparently he wants to go to a playoff team. I don't know how likely that is.
I'll bet Daniel Jones does want that. You know what I want, though? I want to know what's making memories for you.
Sure, I'll go first, because my memories for this week are the memories of me as an athlete from this most recent weekend. I just ran another marathon, folks. And I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to be very honest. And this isn't for, I'm happy. I'm happy to have done it. It was a great accomplishment. Damn, that wall hit hard at mile 17, though. Let me tell you.
I have been sending updates to Xavier, and there did come a point where I was like, I'll let Xavier know when he finishes. We don't need to be given any more specific splits.
No, it was to peel back behind the wall. This training cycle was not as successful for me as the previous one. I knew going in, it was going to be very hard to hit the same times. I really didn't hit the gym at all in the past 3 months. And you might think, oh, gym, running, those are 2 different things. No, for a marathon distance, you absolutely need to be in the gym, not lifting heavy, but like doing some lifting to hit those same muscles to make sure that you're going to have the strength to last for 26.2. I had to make a choice. I decided to go more with the long runs, and my cardio was absolutely there. My heart rate never got into zone 5. At all for this entire time. So my cardio was there the whole way. But there was one last hill, not the last hill of the race. I had gotten through several hills and was like, that was tough, but we're good. That was tough, we're good. Right around mile 16, 17, you're going through Fairmount Park. And I was like, just keep running until you get to the top of the mountain. And I got to the top of the mountain and I said, fuck. I think that was it. I think that was the last of it that I had. And then it turns into a walk run, which is very humbling, of course. But at the same time, to push through that for as long. And I ran for the last 3 miles. The last 3 miles, I recommitted to like, dude, it doesn't matter how fucking slow, just run it. And we did it. And we came in 50 minutes slower than last year. It was a 4:49. But the way I look at it was, I could have started at the very beginning. I could have probably done a 10-minute pace the whole way, and I would have got to the finish line, and I would have had a quote-unquote better time. But to me, the purpose of stuff like this is like to go for it. If you're not going for it, what's the point? And I went for it, and just because I didn't complete it doesn't mean that it was a failure. There's lessons to be learned, and if anything, it's just more fuel in the fire for next year, because I know that with a better training cycle, having this better cardio base than I ever had when I started training for the first marathon, a PR is in me. You just got to go down there. You got to get it. It's inspiring. It's inspiring to finish anyway. It's also just like fun. So I raw dogged this one. I didn't have music the whole way.
We really are using that too much in like society.
I mean,
and it's
maybe
effective. Like it does what communication is supposed to do. It gets a point across. But also, man, We're using it too much.
I mean, the meanings of word change as you go
Sure.
along. Like, like swag. Swag means a completely different thing now. It works. And, we don't need to. But I was listening to no music. I was just listening to the Philadelphia crowd as it went. And I got to tell you, Philly remains a one of one city. I fucking love this place. Although my shirt said, I fucking hate this place, which just felt very macabre and gallows humor type stuff to approach this marathon that I knew I most likely didn't have my best performance in me. Got all kinds of compliments from the crowd. Most people got it. My favorite comment, though, I need to shout out, because most people were like, yeah, Alec Boom, go Phils. There was one lady who said, in one of the finest Delco accents I've ever heard, yeah, this city hates you, dickhead.
That's what kept you going the rest of the way.
It was right around mile 23. I think I kept running after that. So
There you go. That's what pushed you.
Shout out to her. And you do a marathon. It doesn't matter the time. You did a fucking marathon. It's an accomplishment in of itself. So I'm proud of that. And I am proud that in 2025, I'm going to hit PR again, baby.
You got this.
Yeah, I mean,
James, is yours positive?
Oh, yeah.
All right, then maybe we should save yours for last, so we're not ending on a
Yeah,
negative.
bring things down, baby.
Before I get into that, I do just want to shout out the Orlando Pride for winning the NWSL. Marta finally got her first NWSL title. Phenomenal player. Bad history of finishing second in a lot of things. It's not like she's never won anything before, but great to see that. Not sure if she's going to retire, but she will be 39 before the start of next season, so very happy that she at least got this one. But the thing that I really want to talk about today, Katie Barnes, a writer for ESPN, put out a long-form article called Inside San Jose State's Polarizing Volleyball Season. And I highly recommend reading this entire article. If you do not have the time, there is a podcast version of this where Katie Barnes spoke with Alyssa Ronig for ESPN Daily for today, the 26th of November. For those who do not know, this article is a deep dive about San Jose State's women's volleyball team, which has had a very, what's the word I'm looking for here?
Contentious.
Yes, very contentious season because of, first, allegations that happened in April that a player on their team was transgender, and then a lawsuit filed by one of the captains of this same team claiming that one of her teammates was transgender and that it wasn't fair. I can't get into everything that's happened about this, but I want to hit a couple points. One is that this player has been on San Jose State for 3 years, has played college volleyball for 4 years, played women's high school volleyball and women's club volleyball, and this was never a problem until this year. And the impetus for this is apparently the captain of San Jose State, Brooke Slusser, who is the named plaintiff in the lawsuit, went to Slovenia with 10 other Mountain West players for like an all-star team over the summer. And apparently at this all-star festival, they started talking about this allegedly transgender athlete and deciding that they didn't want to play against her anymore, despite, again, having already played for San Jose State for 2 years with no incidents whatsoever. In September, Southern Utah canceled their game against San Jose State, claiming that they just needed rest and couldn't do another non-conference game at the time. That no one thought about, no one put a second thought to, until Mountain West teams started forfeiting games against San Jose State as well. They have 6 wins by forfeit so far this year heading into the Mountain West tournament. And there's a couple things that I wanted to talk about real quick. After this lawsuit came to light and things were getting, really, really contentious, they finally got to play a game against Colorado State, the best team in the Mountain West. And they got thumped 3-0. That's one of the things that has to be, that can't be stressed enough. They're not like a good team. And this player is not the greatest player of all time. They're they're an above average Mountain West player that could not play for any top women's volleyball team. After this loss to Colorado State, and this is something that I did not know about until reading this article, the captain who is part of the lawsuit claimed that the allegedly transgender player and a couple other athletes on San Jose State's team met with a Colorado State player to give them their scouting report and essentially let them know that they weren't going to guard or protect the captain and to just continuously attack her. So these allegations were made that essentially the transgender player and a couple others were colluding to throw the match as retaliation for the lawsuit. This was investigated by the Mountain West. They hired private investigators, had multiple interviews, reviewed video footage. This never happened whatsoever. The coach even said we didn't have a scouting report shared with the players until the day of the match. So because the loss made the lawsuit look worse for the people claiming that it was an unfair advantage, they then took it even further by lying and saying that the loss was intentional to try to distract from the lawsuit. And then that gets cleared as totally fake. Just yesterday, there was a ruling because the Mountain West teams that have forfeited filed for an emergency injunction prior to the Mountain West tournament to say that, one, San Jose State shouldn't be allowed to participate, and two, that they should not have the losses on their record from the forfeits.
Dude, I don't want to give any more fucking oxygen to these dickheads. You forfeited. Fuck right off. Just a bunch of fucking assholes. You don't get to just wipe the loss away because you didn't want to fucking compete. I'm just so tired of these dickheads.
And so that's the thing. The judge, Judge S. Cato Cruz, district judge, ruled that there was no reason why they should have waited until right before the tournament to file this injunction. They made these forfeits months ago. The rules for the Mountain West regarding their transgender policy has not changed since this player has been, this allegedly transgender player has been competing there. There was no reason for injunctive relief. They appealed to the 10th Circuit, which turned them down. So this tournament is going to go off as expected. The question is whether there's going to be further forfeits during it, or if they try to appeal to the Supreme Court to maybe get transgender policies regarding sports overturned at, the Supreme Court level. And that part is scary, but I think we're still a little away from that happening. But there are, legitimate questions that some people there are some people who are not bigots who may have quite legitimate questions of fairness. And I want to let people know that in this case, what we have here, the people who are suing against this participation have been lying nonstop about everything. As part of their lawsuit, they said that this allegedly transgender player, and I keep saying alleged because there has been no statement from the player or the school about whether or not this player is transgender or not. There were claims that were made by Riley Gaines, who sucks, and put in this lawsuit and repeated by Donald Trump that this player could spike the ball 80 miles per hour and was hitting people in the face, breaking their noses and injuring women. ESPN used high-speed cameras to actually measure the miles per hour of her spikes in games. This spike that was claimed to be 80 miles per hour was in a game against Iowa that, again, claimed to hit someone in the face and injure them. One, it hits them in the shoulder and the play goes on, no one is hurt. Two, the ESPN's camera calibration measured it at 51 miles an hour. Across all the games that were reviewed, her average spike speed was 50.6 miles per hour, with the fastest at 64 miles per hour, which is fast, but not near the top of spike speeds and nowhere near the supposed 80 miles per hour that was injuring people. Second, this player is 6'1", which is the exact average for women's volleyball players at the NCAA level. The tallest player in the conference is 6'7". Of the teams that played in the Final Four last year, the average is 6'2.5". So I read an article from the San Francisco Chronicle about going to the last game of the season for San Jose State. If you had no idea who they were talking about, you would never guess. This is not a thing where the stats or the size bear it out that one player is so much better or more dominant or physically imposing than others and causing actual injury. Everything that's been used against this woman has been a lie for attention in a way to set up a lawsuit to overturn transgender participation at a federal level and block it everywhere. So that is going to be a case that happens at some point. But this whole situation, I feel so terrible for this player that she competed at the college level for so long with no issues, and it's her own roommate and captain of her team who, again, they've been playing this season together in games with no obvious issues, despite knowing that her captain is suing her. And it's just been a wild situation, and I hope that she can find peace with this with everything here, have a good end to her last season playing college volleyball, and San Jose State can actually play some games, whether they win or lose, just actually get to do it without all of this hanging over their heads, because it's really, really sad.
You're muted.
Yeah, it sucks, and I'm glad that we're giving a detailed account. I just also, my frustration comes to the fact that they don't fucking care about any detailed account. There's no point to that. There's no point to us trying to prove them wrong. They don't care, as evidenced by this story. It's good that we care. Anyway, you know what else we care about? Baseball! If you go to Baseball Reference now, you used to have to scroll down a little bit to get to the advanced value portion of the baseball players' stats to get WAR and all of that. If you go, beginning now, to a Baseball Reference page, literally next to the season and age, the very next statistic listed is WAR. B-WAR, of course, the Baseball Reference version of it. And I will admit, I think that's maybe even a little too crazy, and I'm someone who's loved that OPS is up on the scoreboards and out stadiums, and I'm glad that this is being considered a statistic on par with things like hits and runs and home runs. And it's just interesting to see the way that we talk about baseball evolve. And you could taking a moment to acknowledge the United States, your third place champions in the Premier 12 tournament. It was their second time in 2 days scoring 6 runs against Venezuela.
Yeah, fuck you, Venezuela.
The United States and Venezuela had their match in front of an audience that was in line with what most of the matches not involving the host country were. About 8,500 altogether is what you were seeing for any game not featuring Japan. Japan did make it to the gold medal match. And folks, if I had a nickel for every match that was held November 25th in which a medal was contested, that was a rematch of a game from the previous day, I would have 2 nickels because the gold medal match was a rematch between Japan and Chinese Taipei or Taiwan. Japan riding a 27-game international win streak coming into this, packed the stadium. They had averaged about 35,000 fans in the Tokyo Dome for all these exact same venue, 4 times as many people. And all of those Japanese fans saw their team get shut out by the combined pitching of Lin Yumin, Xiang Yi, Chen Kyun-yo, and Lin Xianwei. I'm very sorry if I pronounce any of those. Chen Chia-hien is the center fielder who absolutely ripped the fucking cover off the ball during this tournament, and in this game went 3 for 5 with a double, a home run, and 3 RBI in the 4-0. I cannot think... I don't want to pull out the hyperbole of the Miracle on Ice match, but this is a little bit Japan's B team. But still, these are not NPB guys from Taiwan who came to play the Taiwanese team. They are almost all CPBL, the Taiwanese Professional Baseball League, and just incredible to see them pull off. This is their first ever international gold medal in any baseball play. Astonishing. An astonishing time to get that. An astonishing team to beat. An astonishing way to do it. So consider me amongst the people who will know that the Premier 12 tournament is happening next time.
I'm a big fan of the Premier 12 tournament. The USA roster is the who's who of guys.
It's Rich Hill and then a bunch of dudes.
It's so good. It literally is Rich Hill and a bunch of dudes. Half them don't have Wikipedia pages, which for American baseball players is really hard. Anyone who makes it past fucking single A gets a Wikipedia page. And there's still 9 guys without Wikipedia pages and another 7 who are just free agents. Mike Scioscia coached this team. I didn't know what he was doing anymore.
No, I love how with all these national teams, when it's the B guys, it's always some guy that was a coach 15 years ago, Jeff Van Gundy coached U.S. basketball for like the America qualifiers 3 years ago. Just like, why not? Yeah, throw him out there. He's not doing anything else. Mike Scioscia, show up for 2 weeks, fill out some lineup cards, get paid, wave your little cap. Why not?
Well, all of those, largely some delightful examples of sports offering us some escape from this hectic world. And Xavier, I understand if we're trying to escape from this intro segment into our main course today, that is something along the lines of what you want to discuss?
Yeah, escapism might be good for sometimes just to get your mind off of everything. And sports can be an escape for us as viewers, but it can also be an escape for the athletes. And I wanted to start off today by talking about someone for whom this is as literal as possible. Have either of you ever heard of Yusra Mardini?
I mean, I'm assuming not actually Italian, but it does sound vaguely Italian.
It is not Italian.
It sounds like a Romanian dish, maybe.
Okay.
There's
Getting
definitely
closer.
rice. There's definitely rice in this.
Getting closer. Yusra was born on March 5th, 1998 in Damascus. She is Syrian.
This is going to go great. There's going to be such a happy ending to this story.
Hey, there'll be a happy ending. I don't know about the middle, but the ending, great. Yusra's father, Azat, was a swimming coach and an ex-national team swimmer for the Syrian national team. He had his daughters start swimming as soon as they were able. Started with his oldest daughter, Sarah, and then his next daughter, Yusra, put her in the pool when she was 3 years old. Yusra showed enough promise that the Syrian Olympic Committee provided support for her training. And eventually, as a 14-year-old, Yusra competed at the 2012 FINA World Swimming Championships in Turkey. And if you know anything about Turkish and Syrian relations, that is not an ideal place to make your international competitive debut. And it's even worse when you're doing that during the heart of the Syrian civil war, which started in 2011 and has significantly impacted your ability to train. Quote, all of a sudden you couldn't go where you wanted, or your mom calls you when you're on your way and says, come back, there's something happening there. School would be canceled for several days, or someone is shooting and you have to run. So she makes this international debut at 14. She competes in 3 events. Best finish is 68th out of 78 in the women's 200-meter freestyle.
So close.
I know. I really
I'm glad that she pushed a little further.
But it's still not a bad showing for a 14-year-old in the middle of war. Earlier that year, her family home was destroyed in the Daraya massacre, which was one of the worst massacres of the early part of the Civil War, with hundreds of civilian deaths. 2 of her fellow swimmers were killed. One day, a bomb was dropped on the roof of the center of the pool that she trained in. It just didn't explode. It just went right through the roof and landed in the pool. And as things continued to get worse, quote, I told my mom, okay, enough is enough. And she said, fine, find someone I can trust to take you and you can go. So on August 12th, 2015, 17-year-old Yusra and her oldest sister Sarah left with 2 of their father's cousins and another friend. They flew from Damascus to Beirut, then to Istanbul, where they connected with a group of smugglers and about 30 different refugees who they stayed with.
The situation was so bad that they were like, the first stop we need to make on our escape from a war-torn country?
Lebanon.
Beirut, Lebanon!
So from Istanbul, the group of refugees was bused to Izmir, Turkey, and then they were taken to a wooded area near the seaside to wait to board a boat to the Greek island of Lesbos. Quote, we thought we were the only bus, but there were 4 or 5 bus loads every day. There are 200, 300 people there. Everyone waiting until there are no police in the sea so they can go. The police, knowing this as a smuggler route for, refugees, had boats in the water off the coast. Because for anyone who doesn't know, the coastline of Turkey is very interesting. There are Greek islands a mile or 2 off the coast. Technically, there are Greek islands throughout the Aegean, all the way to the Turkish coast, and it's caused issues between Turkey and Greece, where Turkey says, those islands shouldn't count for economic zones, so we should have half of the sea. And Greece is no, fuck you, our islands go this far out, we get all of it.
This has literally been going on since the Trojan War.
Yes, and the goal was to get to Lesbos, because it is literally a couple miles off of the Turkish coast. When it's too dark to have boats, they have helicopters patrolling the area as well. But the police would never enter the forest on the coast because they knew the smugglers had guns and didn't want to get into firefights with the smugglers. After 4 days of waiting, Yusra, Sarah, and 18 other people get packed onto a dinghy that's supposed to have about 6 people on it. They head out to sea and get caught by Border Patrol agents and sent back. After a little while, they go out again. After 20 minutes, getting them out into open ocean, the motor dies, and this dinghy starts to take on water. Of the 20 people on board, only Yusra, Sarah, and 2 other men knew how to swim. So the 4 jumped overboard. It was about 7 at night, and the waves were very rough. Quote, everyone was praying. We were calling the Turkish police, the Greek police, saying, please, please help us. We have children. We are drowning. And they just kept saying, turn and go back, turn and go back. Yusra and Sarah swam for 3.5 hours, helping pull the boat along. We used our legs and 1 arm each. We held the rope with the other and kicked and kicked. Waves kept coming and hitting me in the eye. That was the hardest part, the stinging of the salt water. But what were we going to do? Let everyone drown? We were pulling and swimming for their lives. I'm thinking, what? I'm a swimmer, and I'm going to die in the water in the end. After a little bit, the 2 men who were swimming with them both get tired and stop swimming. So it is just up to Yusra and Sarah, and they are able to pull this boat to shore on Lesbos. When they get there, no one's happy to see a group of refugees, so everyone just ignores them for a while. And after begging for assistance, they eventually get food and aid and are able to travel into mainland Greece, then to Macedonia, then to Serbia, and then to Hungary, where they get stopped because Hungary implemented new rules that blocked refugees from traveling, even if they had valid transportation, which led to riots in Hungary. But finally, they get to go to Austria and then Germany, where they apply for asylum, refugee status. They spend pretty much the entire winter waiting at the refugee registry point known as Lagasso. They had to wait for 8 hours a day at a time, having to come back day after day because the lines were so long. But eventually, they get their refugee documents in order, and they're able to settle in Berlin. Now, it's about 3.5 years since she last competed internationally. The war had stopped everything. She has just spent months fleeing for her life from Syria to Germany, but she really wanted to get back to swimming. She connects with a local German swimming club, Wasserfreud Spandau, and through that ends up working with a coach named Sven Spanakrebs. Around this same time, the IOC was in the process of creating a refugee team to compete at the Olympics. They had a list of 43 candidates who could potentially make the final team of 5 to 10. They still could only afford to have about 5 or 10 people in the final team, and you had to qualify for the Olympics, by the Olympic qualifying rules anyway. But they were going to have, a couple refugees compete under that IOC banner. Yusra gets included on this short list because she did make some headlines in the journey from Syria to Germany because she was, an international swimmer, at least a little bit. Quote, when she arrived in Germany as a refugee, we had to get her body fat down and build muscle to make up for those lost years in speed. But her technique was good, said Svana Krebs. In a condensed 4-month schedule, 2 a day, 2-hour water sessions, 1 hour aerobic training on dry land, school in between. Quote, she did everything I asked. Wake up at 6 a.m. to go to the pool, classes, gym, back in the pool. Despite being on the short list, both Yusra and Coach Sven thought, well, if they do this again in 2020, we can make it for there. It's too much to make up for, not having trained for 3+ years. However, on June 3rd, 2016, 2 months before the games, Yusra gets named to the 10-person refugee team, qualifying for the 100-meter freestyle and the 100-meter butterfly. At the age of 18, Yusra makes her Olympic debut at the 100-meter butterfly on August 6th. She's part of the first heat She's up against swimmers from Grenada, Yemen, Rwanda, and Qatar. And she swims a 1 minute, 9 seconds, and 21 milliseconds, which is enough to win her heat by a full second over second place.
This is also just a very dense group in terms of countries with political upheaval, we'll say, for that heat.
Yeah, and unfortunately, for this event, winning a heat doesn't mean anything because the top 16 swimmers, regardless of heat, advance to the semifinals. It's kind of the way they structure it is they go worst swimmers to best swimmers. So she won the heat among the worst swimmers, but they're also the only people that she finishes ahead of for the entire competition, finishing 41st out of 45. But this is still, she beat some other Olympic swimmers who were not refugees.
She won the only race that she was put in. What more can you do?
It's really, the cards were stacked against her because, I think she was just holding back. She's like, I will do enough to win. She's preserving for the following heats that she's going to do after she wins this one. Like, Katie Ledecky ducked Yusra. It is unequivocal.
So a couple days later, she's back in the pool for the 100-meter freestyle heats. Once again, she's in that first heat of the worst swimmers. She doesn't finish in last. She finished 7th out of 8, 45th out of 48th overall, and that is the end of her time at the Rio Olympics. But she's not discouraged. Like I said before, she had an incredibly truncated Olympic training program compared to her competitors, and it was always going to be difficult to make up for those 3 years during e-development that she missed, but she wanted to keep trying. She kept training with the hopes of competing again in Tokyo in 2020. She went to the 2017 World Championships in Hungary and the 2019 World Championships in Korea as part of the FINA refugee team as the only women's swimmer on the refugee team. Does okay for her in that she doesn't finish in last. For the delayed 2021 Tokyo Games, she once again makes the now expanded refugee team for the Olympics as one of 2 swimmers, this time qualifying just for the 100-meter butterfly. In a very special moment, she also gets named as one of the 2 flag bearers for the opening ceremony for the refugee team. Whether it's due to a stricter qualification process or COVID interruptions, only 33 swimmers competed in the 100-meter butterfly compared to the 45 from 2016. Yusra is once again in the first heat, and she carves nearly 3 seconds off of her previous time, coming in at 1 minute, 6 seconds, and 78 milliseconds. Unfortunately, this improvement still leaves her in last place. Like I said, I think it's a lot of the lower-level swimmers didn't show up to Tokyo because of COVID. So even though she did better, statistically it's going to look worse, but still a significant improvement. I looked into training regimens for swimmers. They say it can take a year to take 1 second off your time. So, she was starting at a further back spot because of all those disruptions because of the war, but she did take off 3 seconds in about 5 years, which is pretty good. She still has one more event of note after this. She competes at the 2020 World Championships, once again in Hungary. I don't know why Hungary keeps getting World Championships, but they got 2 in the space of 5 years. Once again, she's the only woman as part of the FINA refugee team. She competes in the 50-meter butterfly and the 50-meter freestyle. In the freestyle, she finishes in 29.85 seconds, which was 65th, but 65th out of 93. So technically one of her best results ever. And in the butterfly, she sets a personal best of 30.08, which is good enough for 50th out of 62. So, pretty significant improvement compared to a lot of her earlier results. But this is pretty much the end of Yusra's competitive career. She understands that she missed out on too much time, in her youth because of the war, and she's not going to catch up to people at this time. But this isn't the end of Yusra's story because she has a lot of other things going on along these times too. So in May of 2017, she became the youngest ever Goodwill Ambassador for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. She traveled to refugee camps all over, especially in places like Jordan that have a lot of Middle Eastern and Palestinian refugees, where she did talks and philanthropy work. She spoke on Capitol Hill as a representative for refugees just last year. She went to USC and is a full-time student at the Cinema and Visual Arts School, which, as a sidebar, is a really, really good school. I visited there because I have a film degree. So, very cool thing. She even started the Yusra Mardini Foundation to support sports and education for refugee communities. According to an interview with the Financial Times, her foundation is less about providing emergency care and more about providing an environment that would spark the imagination, develop skills. She says, quote, everyone is always thinking about what refugees immediately need, food, security, and medical aid. That's how I thought, what if I give them sport? Some of the classes that the foundation have put on have been actually really remarkable. There's one that's a swimming class for refugees. That's one about learning to swim, but two about helping participants deal with trauma from the experiences many of them had, fleeing their homes across the Mediterranean Sea in horrible conditions. So it's getting them comfortable in the water just for that before teaching them how to swim. And in 2023, she was named one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people. She also worked with Eurosport to do coverage of the refugee team at the Paris Games during this year, which is cool. And there's still going to be more to come from Yusra with her foundation. She is very young compared to a lot of people that we talk about. I still wanted to bring her up because the athletic part of her career is still definitely over. But I do expect to see more from her and from her foundation. And if people are interested, there is a movie that came out in 2022. It's not a documentary. It's a docudrama, or it takes liberties with it. But it's on Netflix. It's called The Swimmers, and it's about Yusra. And apparently it's really, really good. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. I plan to watch it this weekend when I have more time. But if you are interested, put on a movie and watch and learn more about all these things I just talked about. But that's my person, Yusra Mardini.
I don't know, pretty young. Sounds like she could still swim again at any point. That's tough. That's tough for me.
There's a certain je ne sais Billy Hamilton about her.
No, we can leave that in the past. We can leave that behind in 11. Diaz, how you feeling?
I'm feeling good. And, I think after Xavier's appropriately inspirational story, I want to go in a slightly different direction. It's a fun direction, but cool. It's a slightly different take on escapism. Because Xavier's interpretation of escapism is, of course, valid. But to me, what escapism comes down to at its core is that to either yourself or to others, you want to appear to be something that you're not. That's kind of a goal of escapism, whether you're cosplaying or something like that. That's really what it comes down to at its core. And when it comes to my guy, he might be the very most accomplished at appearing to be something that he is not of all time. In his football career, my guy had top clubs across the world convinced that he was a top footballer. His professional career would start in Mexico and would also take him to France. But it was in his native Brazil that his playing exploits became legend. The Brazilian press has described him as the Forrest Gump of football, but his friends might call him the Pinocchio, owing to the fact that despite a 13-year career playing for some of the most historic clubs in all of Brazil, he never actually played a single minute for any of them. He's one of the greatest hustlers in the history of sports, and he's my guy this week, Carlos Kaiser.
Fuck.
I believe I have heard of this guy before.
You've probably loosely heard of him. I know Xavier's more than loosely heard of him. But
Xavier clearly knows exactly what we're about to talk about.
This is fun.
He's an incredible guy, but before he was Carlos Kaiser, he was born Carlos Henrique Raposo on April 2nd, 1963 in Porto Alegre, Brazil.
Okay, cool. That date of birth and the last name Kaiser, I definitely needed to get some things checked off real quick here in South America.
Of course, no. We'll get to how he became Carlos Kaiser, but he was born Carlos Henrique Raposo.
Way.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't that way. Don't you worry. Carlos Raposo grew up poor, and in reflecting on his childhood, he always saw football as the only way out of that cycle of poverty that his family was accustomed to. Like any Brazilian child, he took to soccer at a young age, and when he was 9, he signed for Botafogo Juniors. And Botafogo is perhaps the most historic club in all of Brazil. He spends 1 year playing for their youth academy before he goes to Flamengo, another one of the big giants in Brazilian football, where he plays for their youth academy until he's 16 years old. He eventually parts ways with Flamengo juniors, but while he's playing for another youth club, he has a teammate who is being scouted by Puebla, one of the top Mexican clubs. And it just so happens that on this game, Carlos Raposo shows out, has a great game. And as a result of that, the scout then approaches him afterwards, and he signs his first professional contract with Puebla of Mexico. So he travels to Mexico, playing for Puebla, which is one of the most historic clubs in all of Mexico, been around since 1904. Once he gets there and he gets to training, they pretty quickly realize, oh shit, that wasn't who he is. That was the best game he's ever played. And what he actually is like a pretty mediocre, not very talented guy. Looks the part. He's 6'1", has the body of a footballer, but when you actually get down to it, does not have the skills to play on a professional level, at least at this point. He's only 16 when he signs with Puebla, but after a few months being under contract with Puebla, he doesn't ever see the pitch for an actual game, and they end his contract, and he goes back to Brazil. Very disheartened by the realization that he's very far off from being a professional footballer. He returns to his family home, and he's right back into that cycle of poverty. His football career doesn't look like it's going anywhere. But again, we got to remember, he's 6'1", he looks the part, and in particular, he looks a lot like Renato Gaucho, who stars for his local club, Gremio. And it's to the point that when he's walking down the street, people will yell out at him, Renato, Renato. After enough of being stuck in poverty and having people say, hey, you look like Renato, he decides to say, you know what? I am Renato. This gets him in to all of the top clubs around town, and it works for him for a while. He gets into the club, he says he's Renato, he gets the free drinks, he gets the girls, until eventually there's one time that he's at a club, and the real Renato Gaucho is attempting to enter, only to be told, what? No, you're not Renato Gaucho. Renato's already in there. You're clearly an imposter. So the real Renato gets into the club and is looking for this guy who's purporting to be himself. And he meets Carlos Raposo. And Carlos Raposo, it's very important to note, has a natural charisma to him. He's able to smooth talk these kind of things. Not only is Renato Gaucho okay with Carlos Raposo, isn't trying to fight him, he gives him his endorsement to continue pretending to be him, to get into clubs, to get free drinks, and to get girls.
Absolutely unimaginable amounts of riz.
Unassailable amounts of riz. And not only does he get the blessing, they actually become friends after this. And Renato Gaucho...
This is fucking Dickie Greenleaf, Tom Ripley or whatever. This is Mr. Ripley before he kills him.
Ripley's Believe It or Not. You got to believe it when it comes to Carlos. But as I said, he makes friends with Renato Gaucho, and he continues to just get into clubs saying that he's him, having the fun. But eventually this lie becomes too easy. And he says, if I can convince people that I'm Renato Gaucho, why can't I convince people that I am a top football player? It's important to remember at this time, there's no international database that says that this guy played in this league for this long and scored this many goals. So really, it's just a matter of somebody asks him, hey, you played for Puebla for 6 months. How'd you do? And using his friends in the soccer world, such as Renato Gaucho, along with others, they corroborate the story that he begins to spin, which is, I was actually so good at Puebla that they begged me to apply for Mexican citizenship so that I could play for the Mexican national team. But it was so easy for me there that I came back to Brazil because I want to play for the top teams here. And I want to play for the Brazilian national team. Again, if it's just him saying this, it's not going to work. But he's friends with Renato Gaucho. He's friends with other top players in Brazil. And they all vouch for him because they've had so much fun partying with him. Why not have this guy in the Brazilian league? He'd be an awesome teammate to have. And they vouch for him, and so begins the 171 is what they call it in Brazil, which is the police code for embezzlement, but is also more colloquially as slang. If somebody is a 171, they are a trickster. And this is how begins the 171, that is Carlos Raposo's career. First of all, he has to adopt his alias, Carlos Kaiser. He's called Carlos Kaiser because, allegedly, when he was at Puebla, he not only bears a striking physical resemblance to the German star Franz Beckenbauer, he actually plays a lot like Franz too. So he became Carlos Kaiser. But while that is the approved narrative for how he got the name, his friends also say that it's because the Kaiser beer was his favorite to drink when they went out to clubs, so he became Carlos Kaiser. He enlists all of his friends to corroborate his story that he had been the top scorer in the Mexican League. He only came back because he wants the challenge of doing it in his native Brazil. And quickly in this offseason, he becomes the top transfer target for all the top clubs in Brazil. Finally, Botafogo, where it all started, decided to bring him in to be their star signing. He's only 18 years old. He looks the part, and he's going to take us to the top.
That's okay. I do have to stop for 1 second because that's nuts to me that theoretically the team with the most tape on him most thoroughly has the wool pulled over their eyes.
Well, it's important to remember he only spent from age 9 to 10 with Botafogo for juniors. Flamengo was where he spent from 10 to 16.
Okay.
Flamengo should be able to see through the ruse, but Botafogo can see when he was 9, I saw a little something. I guess he figured it out in the Mexican League. He's here to stay now. For the month or two before training camp, he's living the dream. He is the star signing for Botafogo. Doesn't have to pretend to be Renato Gaucho now. He just gets to be Carlos Kaiser and enjoy all the benefits. But eventually, training camp comes around, and he realizes, shit, they're going to find me out here. The first week is largely just physical conditioning drills. And here he shines because, again, he looks the part. 6'1", strong, fast. But what everybody always said is he was a great footballer, except the only problem was the ball. Anytime he got the ball, that's when he fucked up. But again, he has teammates that are in on this as well. So he concocts a plan in the first live training session. They're scrimmaging. He tells one of his buddies, hey, when you play this cross to me, put it a little too high. And so he puts the cross in. They put it a little too high. He jumps. And when he lands, he grabs at his hamstring. Ow, I'm injured. Fuck, I really wish this hadn't happened. I'm hurt now. For the Brazilian football system, at least, MRIs were not readily available. Medical imaging wasn't readily available. So if a guy said he was hurt, you just believed him. So now he's able to just rehabilitate the injury, continue collecting checks, but I'm injured. What do you want from me? There's nothing I can do. Works for his whole first season. He collects all of his paychecks just while rehabbing his hamstring. And he manages to get halfway through the second season before finally they're starting to be like, hey, man, you've had a hurt hamstring for a year and a half now. We sure would like if you played football for us. But then he gets another friend who's a dentist to write a note saying that he needs oral surgery. He's unable to play right now. And that buys him another couple of months. But eventually Botafogo are like, okay, enough of this. We've been paying you for 2 years. You haven't played a single game. We're terminating the contract. But now Flamengo has learned that the mighty Kaiser has actually been released from his contract with Botafogo. He is available again. And so Flamengo jumps on it. And after 6 years of having him on their youth squad to know who he is, they decide, no, it's time. We need to go after this top prospect.
Okay, so I was just early in my disbelief.
You were early. Exactly. It came back around. Don't you worry. He signs with Flamengo and again runs the exact same kind of drill that he did with Botafogo. I'll do all the physical training when it's just physical. I'll look good there. The first time we get to live action, oh no, my hamstring. I jumped and now my hamstring hurts and I'm not able to play anymore. Coaches were none the wiser. Players were in on it. And it's not just the players that he knew at first that corroborated for his first contract. It quickly spreads throughout the team. Because, again, if you're going to pull this off, you need the support of your teammates. Where he was really successful with the teammates is his penchant with women was not limited to just himself. he would run schemes. I shouldn't say schemes.
The greatest wingman in history.
He is the greatest wingman in history, and I don't mean cutting in from the outside of the box to get a shot on goal. I mean that not only would he have girlfriends for himself, he would convince his girlfriends to bring all of their friends to the team hotel so that when there were curfews enforced, like, okay, guys, game tomorrow, you're not allowed out after 10 p.m. They just go down 2 floors to where all of the girlfriend's friends are staying, and they do what young pro athletes in their early 20s do.
Party.
Of course, party and have fun. and all that good stuff.
Old-fashioned Christian fun.
But, with that being the case, he is obviously a beloved teammate. They are going to do everything that they can to protect him. Kaiser said of himself, quote, "If sex was football, I would be Pelé."
Kaiser versus Mutombo versus Wilt. Who wins?
If you're in South America, I feel like Kaiser has the home field advantage there. But in America, pure numbers, it's really hard to say. It's 2 different games. It's football and it's football. So it's hard to be able to make that call. But it helps for him to have teammates who will provide cover when anytime that the coaches or managers start saying, hey, I think this Carlos Kaiser guy doesn't actually play football. He has his teammates to step in and say, no, he's great. Keep him. Do not get rid of him. The rehab story works at Flamengo, but again, as with any hustler, eventually you're going to try to push it a little too far. And what got Carlos Kaiser busted with Flamengo is he had a large fake cell phone that he would frequently take calls on, and he would pretend to speak English to the phone. He doesn't know English, to be clear. He knew English words, and he would just say English gibberish into the phone. And then when a teammate would come up, he'd get off the phone and be like, oh, yeah, that was Liverpool. I think they want me to come over for next year, but I'm dedicated to this club. I want to stay here. It worked well enough until eventually there was a trainer who was fluent in English and just waited for him to get off the phone and then said, hey, man, that was all gibberish. What the fuck are you even talking about? And then would investigate the phone, would realize that it's a fake phone. That kind of broke down the trust with Flamengo, and they would not renew his contract. So this is 1983. He's been at the 2 biggest clubs in Brazil. His act's starting to wear thin. So he's going to head west to Argentina, and he's going to try to pull it off there as well. He signs with Independiente, which is one of the most historic clubs in all of Argentina. They have a great history of success, and while again, in 2 years, he did not see the pitch once, he was a member of the Independiente team in 1984 that won the International Cup 1-0 over Liverpool.
I'm so mad this guy gets a trophy.
He gets to be in the trophy. He is in the team photo. It is incredible. What a great hustle. But again, after 2 years at Independiente, they've now caught on, and he's out there. One of the things that makes this ruse so successful is he never stays too long at any one spot. He knows he can't pull it off for too long. He has the 3 months in Mexico that were legitimate where his contract got cut short. Okay, now I can go to Brazil and I can lie about my time in Mexico. After playing for the 2 clubs there, now I can go to Argentina, lie to them about I was so accomplished in the Mexican League, I did all this in Brazil, they sign him. But after that time runs out in Argentina, now, the well's poisoned a little bit in Brazil, in Argentina, in Mexico. But where it's not poisoned is if he goes across the pond. He has a friend that plays for a French team called Gazélec Ajaccio. They play in the 2nd division of France, and he reaches out to his friend, says, hey, I don't know if it's going to work here anymore. Do you think you can get me in over there? The friend puts in a word. Sure enough, Gazélec signs him. But as compared to other places where he's just another signing, he's just another body, it's easier to be under the radar and kind of skate by with this injury excuse. When he arrives at Gazélec, he's arriving as the biggest signing in club history. Here is this guy who was the leading goal scorer in the Mexican League, pegged to be a Mexican international at just 16 years old. He won the Club World Cup with Independiente. He's played for Botafogo. He's played for Flamengo. What an incredible signing. How were we, this but humble 2nd division French club, able to sign this Brazilian wonderkind known as Carlos Kaiser. And so they have one of the big unveilings that you'll see for like when an Mbappe or a Messi signs with the next club. He's not expecting this, but when he gets there to sign his contract, the stadium is packed with crazy fans, and there's a whole bunch of balls that are out on the pitch, and he's slowly putting together, oh, fuck. They want me to do a live training session in front of all of these fans. They're going to see that I suck, like, immediately. What do I do? How can I pull this off? But again, he is charismatic. He's a hustler by nature. He's very quick on his feet. And so seeing all these balls on the pitch, there's only one thing he can think of. He starts kicking every single one to the fans. He's pointing at them. He's getting them hype. He's kissing the badge between kicks. And there's probably about 30 balls on the pitch. He boots every single one of them into the stands. And by the time that he has cleared the field, he heads back out to a rousing ovation from the fans who are now absolutely in love with him. He's giving the balls to the fans. He's connecting with us. He's pointing to the badge. He's kissing the badge. He's one of our own.
That's legitimately a great fucking idea.
He's a natural-born hustler.
An absolutely natural-born hustler. And according to him, with the Mexican League, he never actually played. The Brazilian teams, he was able to fool. Independiente, he never played. He says he did actually play for this French team, but never for more than 20 minutes at a time, never scored a goal. And basically, after 1 year of playing for this French team, they were like, okay, this isn't what we thought we were signing up for. We're done with this guy. We're going to get him out of here. But upon his return to Brazil, he now has a year of playing in France that the only resource that we have to know how it went is him and what he tells all of his friends in the Brazilian press, all of the journalists that he's made friends with over the year, who are more than happy to spin a yarn in his favor. He was actually a top goal scorer for this French team. They won the league. He got them promotion up to the top division for the first time. What an incredible 1 year stay that he had. Although some articles said that he played there for 7 years, which like he was in Brazil for 5 of those 7 years that they were then saying that he was playing in France. So like at a certain point, somebody's got to connect some dots, but the dots remain unconnected. And upon his return to Brazil, with all of these articles being written about how great he was in France, there is one club that is still willing to fully eat the onion, and that is Bangu, playing in the Brazilian top flight. And they signed Carlos Kaiser. And what's important to know about the structure at Bangu at the time, the coach is a former teammate. The coach is all in on it. He knows what the deal is. The owner of Bangu is very much not in on it. The owner of Bangu is named Castor de Andrade, and he is a mob boss in Brazil. And he is not the kind of man that you want to disappoint. At first, Carlos Kaiser is still able to run his same scheme, but eventually de Andrade is fed up. I've paid all this money for this star to come in. He's not played a single game. I don't care how injured he is. He needs to play in this game. And the coach is able to calm him down a little bit, like, hey, we're easing him back from injury. Let me name him to the bench, okay? And, we'll see how it goes in warm-ups. Maybe he'll play, but let's be smart. We don't want our star signing to get hurt, do we? And De Andrade goes for this. But it's about the 70th minute in the game. They're down 2-0. There's no sign of him going in. And finally, De Andrade comes down to the bench and says, as a mob boss says, I think it would be pretty nice if Carlos Kaiser got in this game. And so Carlos Kaiser is sent to be substituted in. The panic is as real as it's ever been. The mob boss that I play for is making me go into this game. He's expecting me to produce results, and I know that I suck. What the fuck do I do now? And so he's about to be checked in when he looks off to the side and he sees some fans yelling something at one of his teammates. Doesn't know what, but what's most important is what he sees. And he sees an opportunity and he sees an out. He goes charging into the stands to fight these fans. Instantly gets a red card before he's even put onto the pitch. He's sent off the field. He does not get into the game.
What a good teammate.
He's an incredible teammate. And what he is, most importantly, is a loyal player to his owner, because Castor de Andrade is obviously furious when he comes into the locker room. What the fuck was that? You were finally going to play. Carlos Kaiser says, look, those fans were calling you a thief. And I unfortunately lost my father, but to me, you are now my father figure. And if somebody calls my father a thief, I'm going to beat the shit out of them. I don't care what's going on. Nothing else matters more than protecting my father's honor. And Castro de Andrade eats this shit up. Not only does he accept it, he embraces him, he hugs him, and he gives him a 6-month contract extension.
So much Riz.
An undeniable amount of Riz. But unfortunately, the next day in training, he has another setback with that hamstring. He's not able to get in. And when the extension runs out, he's no longer with Bangu. He would next go to sign for Vasco da Gama, another top flight team in Brazil, but this time there was no ruse about why he was signing with. Everybody knew who he was at this point, but there was a teammate who was an alcoholic, and they wanted to bring Carlos Kaiser in because he has such an unimpeachable personality. He will be a great role model for this player. He will be able to be the babysitter and to keep this guy clean. Never confirmed which specific player it was, so I can't really tell you how successful it was. The guy who was only on teams and only accepted by teammates because of how great he was at partying, the Slurms McKenzie of Brazilian soccer, as it were. I'm not sure how well he would have been as a sober monitor, but that is why they say they signed him. He plays for Vasco da Gama for a year. Doesn't play. Again, is only signed. Does not ever play.
He exists on the roster of Vasco da Gama for a year.
Exactly. He exists on the roster for a year. And, at this point, his career is winding down. He's run out of places to hustle. But as with any of the great soccer players, Pelé had his tour in the USA. Messi had his tour in the USA. It is time for Carlos Kaiser to come stateside and to play for the El Paso Six Shooters, which are an indoor team in Texas. Plays the 1 year there. He does come back. Incredibly, Botafogo signed him one more time at the very end of his career. And he gets his retirement. He started as a Botafogo. He gets to go out as a Botafogo. And after that last signing to play for his original team, he does finally call it quits and hang up the cleats, this time for good, and not to go to the rehab room. When it comes to Carlos Kaiser and his 13-year professional career collecting professional contracts from all these teams, the only division that he ever played in was the French second division, and he did not score a single goal in any of his appearances there. In spite of that, his story has become a Brazilian legend. It is an incredible example of the adage, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And Carlos Kaiser did not know how to play football on a professional level at all, not even close. But he knew the right players, he knew the right journalists, and he knew all of the right tricks to spend 13 years across the globe cosplaying as a football star, finding his escape from poverty, and being able to live the life of the stars even if he himself did not have the skill of one. Just like Xavier has a nice docudrama that you can watch to learn more about Yusra, there too was a documentary made about Kaiser. And if you're interested, it's only $2 to rent on Amazon Prime. And it is called Kaiser, ! The greatest football player, or the greatest footballer who never played.
I am currently looking at the trailer for this documentary. I have it paused on a scene of Kaiser in sunglasses, inside on a couch, with the mountains of Brazil in the background, talking about partying with the Prime Minister of Italy, and this screenshot just says, lots of orgies.
That's football, baby.
That's being a good teammate, the wingman, so many assists in his career, no goals, but a fascinating character, a lousy football player, but I do say, a hell of a guy. One of the greatest hustlers in sports history, Carlos Kaiser.
Hell of a guy. It's going to be a tough one to top. To start with mine, I'm going to start with a brief list of 4 athletes. I wonder if you guys can tell me what the common linking theme is. We've got Randy Rosarena, Levon Hernandez, Yoenis Cespedes, and Jose Fernandez. What links these 4 guys?
Running away from Cuba.
Yes, they are all defectees from Cuba, and I could have gone with many other players. I could have gone with Jordan Alvarez, Jose Abreu, Aroldis Chapman, Aledmys Diaz, Alexi Ramirez. The list goes on and on and on. But every list does have to start somewhere. And this particular list starts with my guy today, Rogelio Álvarez. So, nowadays, international relations between the United States and Cuba, they're not great. But let's set the scene for how they are in 1938 when Álvarez is born instead. Because at this point, I had mentioned at one point the wave of Venezuelans that came over. Until then, Cuba is still the main source of Latin players in the major leagues at this time. There's almost 200 of them that have played by the time that he's born in 1938 in the majors. I will say we are saying major leagues, and that is including nowadays many, many Negro leagues. There are a lot of teams that were almost entirely staffed by Cubans at times. In fact, many of the team names would even incorporate Cuban into it. But even with that, and even with the 3 Hall of Famers that played in the Negro leagues, there were still, up to this point, about 20 players who had played for American or National League ball clubs from Cuba. So by the time we get there, it is not unheard of. It's fair to say that Cuba's the number 2 country in baseball at this point. Now, almost all of these players are coming from Havana. When Álvarez is born, he is instead born in a place called Pinar del Rio, and that is often like the northwest corner of the Cuban island. It's a very different region than that of Havana. It's a much more agrarian region where they are primarily growing the tobacco leaves that'll be used for Cuban cigars. When he's born, with fewer players necessarily stand out, one might think that if he's good enough, it's going to be kind of easy to be the guy in this area. Except a couple months after he's born, Hall of Famer Tony Oliva is born in the exact same town. And as they're growing up, Tony Oliva is very quickly referred to as, quote, the best hitter in Pinar del Rio. Even with that being the case, it's pretty safe to say Rogelio, number 2 best hitter in Pinar del Rio. And he does eventually, in 1956, manage to get noticed for his bat as an 18-year-old. And this is going to be his first major league contract with Cincinnati. Since this is the 50s, and we are still in McCarthyism, he is not signed with the Cincinnati Reds. He's signed with the Cincinnati Red Legs, should mention. And with the team, he enters the organization, getting ready for a 2-year stint, really just touring the Western United States through minor league ball clubs as an 18 and 19-year-old. So this kid from provincial Cuba goes first to the Yuma Sun Sox in Arizona, then to the Port Arthur Seahawks in Texas, the Wenatchee Chiefs all the way up in Washington State, and then back down south for the Clovis Redlegs in New Mexico. Almost all the time that he's in these C-level ball clubs, he's regularly like 5 years younger than everybody else on average in the league. But throughout 222 games in this time, he bats .317 with an on-base of .376 and a slugging of .541. Good for a .917 OPS, which even as like a guy who clearly in the field only can really fit at first base, is probably good enough at this point in his career to stick around at first base for a while. So he's been all over the Western United States, and he has another big move on the horizon for 1958. They really do like what they've seen him develop over the last 2 years with 4 teams, and so he's going to their AAA affiliate. Do you know where the Cincinnati AAA affiliate is at this time?
Columbus.
Youngstown.
It's in Havana, Cuba.
What the fuck?
So in 1946, there's a team called the Havana Cubans. They are founded as a member of the Florida International League. This is not a Cuban league. They were a full-on Class C and then later Class B minor league, and they just had this one international team in Cuba. And by the time we get to 1953, they've been bought up by a sugar and insurance magnate named Roberto Bobby Maduro. So he's bought the team, and he wants to turn it into a full-on major league squad at some point. Maybe getting a little bit ahead of himself. But the Springfield Cubs in that year, 1953, fold, and that doesn't mean too much, except that the International League, one of the AAA leagues, now has an opening. And so Maduro seizes this opportunity. He renames the team the Sugar Kings because of all of his millions. And to kick off the 1954 season, the Havana Sugar Kings are a fully fledged AAA franchise. I'm going to take just a second to mention this isn't totally unprecedented. There was one other AAA team at this time not playing in the United States. Quick chance for you to grab it.
AAA not playing in the United States.
No,
Montreal.
not Toronto. It's the Montreal Royals, which Jackie Robinson debuted for professionally or outside of the Negro Leagues. Teams will continue to have a few more AAA teams throughout the years. The Ottawa Lynx, for example, were the feeder team for the Orioles at one point. But this is really the only time other than those couple Canadian clubs and the brief time where the Mexican League was considered a full AAA team, that there is a truly established international AAA team anywhere but the United States. There are plenty of future MLB legends that will come through this squad at one point or another, but the team itself is not all that successful on the field. Fair, maybe to chalk that up to pretty heavy travel compared to some of the other ones. They do get butts and seats though. They are a draw. Crush their attendance figures those first couple seasons under Maduro. And then in 1957, attendance craters for a little bit. We will get to the reasons for why that is momentarily. Finally, in 1958, once Alvarez gets on the team, they are primed for a rebound. Rogelio Álvarez is now 20. He plays reportedly excellent first base defense while slashing 268, 321, 491. And he is now in a league. He thought he was the young kid a couple years back. He's 8 years younger than the average player in AAA during this time. So he's great. Attendance is great. The team is still pretty bad. But finally, in 1959, their record catches up a little bit as they finish 80-73, which is good for third place, which does make the playoffs in the AAA system at this time.
Damn right. Third place matters too.
All you got to do is punch your ticket, because at that point, while Rogelio's taken a bit of a step back, he only batted 196 this season, he's still an everyday player, and he is still a key contributor as the Sugar Kings sweep number 1 seed Columbus in the first round. Then they get to the Governor's Cup, which is like the AAA championship, against the Richmond Virginians. It is a 1-0 11-inning Game 1 victory for the Sugar Kings, and it pretty much just sets them up as a clear team of destiny. Finally, in Game 6, they capture Havana's first ever International League title. And speaking of capturing and the city of Havana, let's talk about the Cuban Revolution for just a second. So, to not get too into the weeds about this major geopolitical conflict, from 1953 to 1959, there is a fight going on between the forces of Fulgencio Batista, who is a more or less dictator that has pretty much been in charge of the country since the early 30s, and then revolutionary forces led by, amongst others, Fidel Castro and Che Guevara. It has ended as of January 1st, 1959. Very nice round number there for them. And, in fact, this brief little synopsis of the season that we just had for the Havana Sugar Kings, that in and of itself was meant to be a little bit of escape, because the entire time, they are dealing with the immediate aftermath of the Cuban Revolution in the country. I'm not going to get too much into the pros and cons of the various fighting forces on either side of the Cuban Revolution. For the purposes of baseball, Fulgencio Batista was a pretty corrupt guy, but he was corrupt in favor of baseball very often, and he liked to send a lot of money towards the people maybe guys that made money in sugar and insurance, like Bobby Maduro. Anyway, the good news is, while Fulgencio Batista loves the Sugar Kings, Castro loves baseball and the Sugar Kings even more. After all of these seasons, they are still the only pro team in Cuba, really, and they've had so many Cubans on the roster throughout the year. They've had so many Cubans graduate to the major leagues. This team, no matter how bad they've been prior to 1959, is a massive source of Cuban pride, and Fidel Castro, wanting to play into that nationalism to an extent, is also a huge fan of the team, in addition to just being a big fan of baseball. He fights hard for the Sugar Kings. The Cuban government goes ahead and buys the radio broadcast rights from Maduro in order to put a cash infusion into the franchise. On opening day, Castro throws out the first pitch. And then Castro was reportedly a pretty good ball player. We get to the point later on the season where there are some not joking columns in Cuban newspapers saying, "Castro, please pitch for the Sugar Kings. They need you." This probably starts as a half-serious bit. However, on July 24th, Castro decides to take the bid a little bit more seriously. He makes his debut in an exhibition game with the team, coming into pitch relief, along with Rogelio Álvarez and all of his teammates, comes into the third inning, does not allow a run in that inning, and gets 2 strikeouts, so shout out Castro. Seemingly,
were they batting to save their lives at that point?
I don't believe so. I think this is legitimately Castro new ball. Now, with that being said, let's talk about guns at these games, because the very next day, literally the day after this July 24th exhibition game, on July 25th, they're playing the Rochester Red Wings, who have traveled from upstate New York to Cuba for just a game on their normal minor league schedule, which is bonkers. This game goes late. Goes so late that it crosses past midnight, which means now it's July 26th. The Cuban Revolution started with, we'll say, some aggressions on July 26th, back earlier in the 50s. And so this is kind of their Independence Day. And so to celebrate, as it becomes midnight on July 26th, everyone in the stadium starts firing off all their guns.
Fun times.
Of which there are many. There are many, many guns in the stadium. And, one of the Red Wings third base coaches does get hit in the neck by a bullet. He doesn't die. He's fine. They do forfeit that series. Castro comes out with how sorry he is in the newspapers the next day. And he is able to smooth things over. As we said, the season continues. They finish 80-73. They make the playoffs and they win a league title. It's a big, big deal. And good news is the season's not even over after that Governor's Cup win, because as champs in the Governor's Cup, they get to participate in this thing called the Junior World Series. At the time, you've got in AAA, the International League and the Pacific Coast League. And then you also have the American Association, which is just kind of like a third upper level non-major league. And so what every year will happen is two of those three leagues will get to send their champion. Very contentious some years in who gets chosen and who doesn't. But in this particular season, the Havana Sugar Kings do get chosen to take on the reigning champions, the Minneapolis Millers. They play 2 games in Minneapolis, which they split. And then they play 5 games in Havana. Not entirely sure how scheduling shook out that way, but what it means is that they are able to absolutely make bank at the gate because over 100,000 people over those 5 games attend, averaging more than 20,000 a game. The Millers themselves from Minneapolis say it was the greatest, besides the machine guns, which they do also mention, it was the greatest baseball environment they'd ever been in their entire life. That is a great attitude because it ends up going to 7 games, and the Havana Sugar Kings, this miracle season, all birthed in the shadow of their successful Cuban Revolution, ends in them being able to walk off a 3-2 win in extras, where Rogelio Álvarez and Havana Sugar Kings win the 1959 Junior World Series. And this is all great. This is all delightful. But there's one big reason that it can't last, and that's that the next year, while Castro loves ball, he loves ball so much that he wants to nationalize the Havana Sugar Kings, like many other United States-owned corporations on the island at this time. And the State Department of the United States simply will not stand for that. So they call up Commissioner of Baseball Ford Frick, and they twist his elbow a little bit, having some influence over that. Midway through the 1960 season, without any choice in the matter, essentially, the Havana Sugar Kings are just up and moved despite the protestations and later court actions taken by the country of Cuba, and they're moved to Jersey City, of all places. Castro is outraged. Maduro is outraged. He's losing his profitable enterprise here. There are 11 Cuban-born players, including Rogelio, who are threatening to leave just to be able to stay in their home country. This fight drags on for a month, and the team does lose some players, but Rogelio is amongst those who do eventually go to Jersey City. At this time, he is still in the Cincinnati organization. Now, the Cincinnati Major League team has become the Reds. They have returned to that after these years of McCarthyism, HUAC Red scare. That being said, with this being a franchise that they just took from communist Cuba, they decide, okay, well, we can't call these guys the Reds. Any guesses what they call this team from Jersey City?
The Blues.
See, that would be more clever than the Jersey City Jerseys, which is what they go with.
Amazing.
And Rogelio is one of the inaugural Jersey City jerseys. He doesn't finish out the season, though, with Jersey. He does, in late September, get a call-up to Cincinnati. Pinch hits against the Pittsburgh Pirates on September 18th. He does go hitless. Also goes hitless a week later in his second appearance against the Phillies. But finally, in Pittsburgh, on September 27th of that year. He gets his first ever major league hit in his first ever start, finishing the 1960 season with a 111 average. 1961, he's back in Jersey City. The whole team, for many reasons I'm sure, is just kind of mid. And this is the last year that Bobby Maduro has any ownership over Jersey City. He's been sold to Cleveland after this. In fact, canonically, this franchise will eventually become the modern-day Norfolk Tides. But Cincinnati moves on to a new AAA organization, the San Diego Padres. And that is where Rogelio has a bit of a bounce back in 1962. 318, 376, 507. It's his best in 5 years. And because of this, he's upgraded from a late September call-up to an early September call-up, spending a whole month in utility role, 214 average, still no extra base hits, but he's kind of like Kaiser in that he's shown that he can perform at that level now. And so in this offseason, the Washington Senators trade for Rogelio Álvarez. They saw his time with San Diego. They like him at first base as a replacement. But the problem is that during the offseason, as he often did, he went back to Cuba. And so now he's having a little trouble getting back to America. This is basically when this becomes a complete and utter lockdown for any players or any Cubans indeed at all that wish to travel to America. That is no longer an option. And so he is going to have to find an alternate route. Now, it should be mentioned, some people like Tony Oliva just stayed in America. Like, there were other Cubans that continued to play in the majors because they did not go back, and so they did not have to deal with any machinations on a diplomatic side. But Rogelio, who again was traded for back in November, by the time we get to March, is still trying to get some resolution on this. Now, do you guys happen to know why, for instance, a Cuban player wouldn't just defect to America in the first place?
They have family?
Any guesses?
Some type of, like, the U.S. is, like, obligated to return them or some shit.
So it's no extradition. What happens is if they go to the U.S. or if they go to Canada, they will be exposed to the Major League draft. Whereas if they defect somewhere like Mexico first, they will be able to sign as an international free agent once they go through the process rather than being subjected to the draft. That's not the case here. He happens to get help from the Mexican government simply because that is the government that is willing to step in here to try and work out some kind of diplomatic agreement. But it takes forever. It eventually takes Castro's like personal signing off on him leaving the country. And it is understood, as it is with many people who make this choice in the world of baseball, there is not a coming back. But this is too much of a chance here in America, except by the time he goes through Mexico and gets into the States, about halfway through the season, not only is there no going back home, there is no home for him here in Washington. Washington had to find a replacement after all this time. They couldn't just sit with this roster spot. And so the trade ends up getting voided. He goes back to San Diego. He's back in Cincinnati's system and spends several more years with them. Then he spends a time with a trio of teams in the Mexican League. But he never again reaches the major leagues. The defection for Rogelio Álvarez is one that does exist in the record books and is important. It will be recognized as the first, but unfortunately does not result in him making it back to the major leagues at any time. And as far as I can tell, he never ends up getting to return to Cuba. After baseball, he doesn't go into like other jobs in the sport. He ends up driving a cement mixer for 30 years in the Miami diaspora region and eventually passes in 2012. In terms of the history of defection, no other player defects until Barbaro Carby in 1980, and even that is still a massive outlier. You're not going to have the modern wave really start until the economic after effects of the Soviet Union's collapse, leaving Cuba without their main trade partner, really kicks off that new modern wave, beginning with Rene Ochoa in 1991. And he's been followed by all of those stars that we mentioned earlier, hundreds of players who some we know and some we don't know, because despite the fact that they continue to leave their home for a better place, they might not find a home here, just like Rogelio Álvarez wasn't able to find one. It is not uncommon for the first guys walking these paths to not get as far as others. So I don't think it necessarily takes away from Rogelio Álvarez that he wasn't able to get back to the level he wanted while trying to chart this path. It is like building a bridge for those behind you. And if Rogelio's escape isn't compelling, maybe one of those other guys is a little bit more compelling. And maybe him leading this exodus of players leaving home with these high hopes, that is really, I think, what his legacy is in the end. And I only hope that that allows him to finally find a home after all of this searching somewhere here in our Hall of Guy.
We have some really deserving candidates and really interesting candidates. This is going to be a tough one.
So here's the thing. I mean, in some ways, it's not a tough one because the funniest thing here is Carlos Kaiser. Like, by a wide margin, Carlos Kaiser is the funniest of these guys. That being said, Xavier, and I'm not trying to cut you out here at all, Diaz, you and I went for a similar interpretation here. Does that mean that Kaiser is able to just leapfrog both of ours because he's outsmarted us? Or does it mean because he doesn't fit into that same category that we need to look at these two more closely?
So the category was sports as an escape. And Kaiser used sports as an escape from the mundane life that he was destined to as someone who wasn't good at sports. So even if it's a different interpretation than the way that I had in my mind or the way that you took it, James, I don't want to disqualify. Like, could there be other categories where Kaiser fits better? Sure. But I think he still fits under the sports as an escape category for that reason. But if you disagree, I am open to...
No, I mean, I was just going to say, Diaz was right to point out, he escaped poverty through sport.
Yeah.
Didn't do the sport, but he did escape poverty through sport.
He is technically using sports as an escape, the best type of escape.
I mean, my pitch for Rogelio is very much what I said there at the end, and I think it's very similar to what I said for Chico Carrasquel when we were talking about South American guys. He is the first instance of a lineage of escapees, one way or another, that follow after him. And my pitch is, lump in everybody else, like your Yoenis Cespedes, like your Alexi Ramirez, all of those guys that have come after him, along with him to some extent because of the template that he set. Because, look, if you didn't hear the story and notice, there wasn't all that much to say about Rogelio Álvarez. A lot of that was just about kind of the circumstances that have forced a lot of players to go into exile. It should also be mentioned that at one point in the very recent past, it looked like that might not have to be the case for people anymore, and that there might be a path to better diplomatic relations with Cuba in order to, among other things, many more important things, but also to facilitate baseball players not having to kill several seasons of their career in order to do this. And then Donald Trump shat all over that. So we are once again going to have to see Cubans making this massive sacrifice as Rogelio did, hopefully with more success.
I definitely like Rogelio as, when we like to cross-reference the previous categories. Archetype founder, first Cuban refugee to come and play pro ball. Like, that's definitely relevant. Yusra, to me, is the most inspiring of the three stories. I think it's incredibly impressive to hey, you had to do your sport for 3.5 hours while carrying other people, or you were all going to die. Throw out championships, medals, that to me is way above that, any of that as a sporting accomplishment. So I definitely really like Yusra as well. But I also agree, Carlos Kaiser is really funny. And this is 100% not diminishing what either of your guys did, because it's incredibly impressive. It's far more impressive than what Carlos Kaiser did. But there are a lot of stories of the inspiring refugee who overcame difficult circumstances and made a better life for themselves. There's only one story of a guy who just straight up told fictions about how good he was and got away with it for a decade and a half. And that is Carlos Kaiser.
I mean, if we're going back to, if we were at a bar talking about which of these stories would make for the best conversation, it's Carlos Kaiser. It's not even close. So, as much as I love Yusra, and she was the inspiration for this category, and I was excited, I'm happy I got the chance to talk about her. You don't need to waste any more time here. I think we're all in agreement. So, Diaz, please do the honors for your guy, Carlos Kaiser.
Well, when it comes to Carlos Kaiser, there's a lot of different ways that you can approach it. You can say that he wasn't any good at football. You can say that he was just a fast talker. You can say that he maybe slept with too many women. And you could say a lot of things about him, and all of those things are going to be true. But what you can also say about Carlos Kaiser that's true is all of his teammates loved him. Everywhere he went, he made people smile. He made people feel good. And maybe his hamstrings were in better condition than he let on. But to have a documentary made about your life as a footballer, you need to truly be, if not one of the greats, you need to be one of the guys. And this is in recognition of the inherent guyness of our guy this week, the greatest hustler in football history, Carlos Kaiser. Welcome to the Hall of Guy.
Well, and here's a fun fact about Carlos Kaiser. Does have more career WAR than Rogelio Álvarez.
Along with the three of us.
James, I want to see if you can guess when you talked about the update to Baseball Reference. What is the first baseball player I looked up on Baseball Reference? They have been discussed on this show before.
I mean, the first one I went to was Barry Bonds, so I don't know who you picked.
Diaz, you have any thoughts?
Go ahead.
Ricky Weeks. I had to see Ricky Weeks again.
Huh.
It makes his career look so much worse. Because I just see zeros and zeros and zeros for like the last 5 years.
Hey, once again, 0 out earns Rogelio Álvarez. But no, all love to Rogelio Álvarez. All love to all three of these guys. And all love to producer Craig, the coders behind him, and our musical director, Don Ham, for that lovely theme music. If there is any love left, anything that remains, we want to give it to you, dear listener, for checking in with us once again. Hey, if you want to continue to check in with us, we are continuing to all now post on Blue Sky. I'll just say what I'm going to say. It's fun to see the sports world migrate over there. And if you are one of the people that have found us on there, or if you're one of the people that have found this show through us having already been on there before this, welcome. It's fun to have you. If you enjoy this show, you can also read stuff that we write with our RTG Dispatch. We got Curtain Call continuing to come out every Wednesday. I'm trying to remember what will be this Wednesday's. It's one about the Houston Comets that was very devastating to write. So you got that. I'm just going to go ahead and say on air now that Xavier said he's going to do something about sports and law, and I'm excited to read it. And now it's on air, so he has to do
Damn it.
You can find all of that at bit.ly/rememberthatguy, all one word, all lowercase. If you enjoyed the show, please do go ahead and share it with a friend, rate and review us wherever you can. And that is all I have for this week. Anything else from you, gentlemen, before we say our goodbyes?
Nothing from me.
Thank God for Jared McCain.
We have been the number one Jared McCain fan cast, and I've been one of your hosts, James.
I've been the very special guest, Xavier.
And I'm Diaz, and if the Sixers can't be normal for one goddamn season, I am going to God.
Either way, so the other thing about the game was I am trying to get over feeling very superstitious about games. I'm trying to shed some of that before the kid. And halfway through the day yesterday, I realized I had my Lamar shirt on. I had my Ravens earrings in. I had all that. I didn't have my Lamar socks on. And I thought to myself, you know what? That's okay. It doesn't actually matter. I need to remember that doesn't actually matter.
No, it matters.
And then about 10 minutes into the second quarter, I was looking at the game. I was like, I mean, and I threw those socks on, and Lamar Jackson ran in 10 yards for a touchdown, not 2 plays later. And I left them on the rest of the game, and they won. So I guess there's that.
The two things with superstition that I want to say. First of all, my personal superstition that I have also, no longer continued into adulthood is I used to think that if the team was doing well, it meant that I couldn't go to the bathroom because I had good energy in me and I couldn't let go of it.
Sure.
And if we were doing badly, I desperately needed to go to the bathroom to get the juju out and to hopefully
the bad vibes are stored in the piss.
Exactly. But the other thing with superstition, and Xavier will remember this, is in the first year of our Dynasty Football League, he was undefeated and was going into Monday Night Football. And his team name was the Luck of the Irish. He had Andrew Luck, and it was Monday Night Football Andrew Luck.
It's a good
pick.
pick.
Yeah, Andrew Luck with the first pick, with my first pick in a dynasty league about 2 years before he retired.
But importantly, when Luck was healthy, he was very good. Xavier's team was undefeated, and his team was so named for the captain, the Luck of the Irish. the week of this Monday Night Football game was also the week that Temple played Notre Dame. So it was a bad omen to have your team name be the Luck of the Irish when we're going against the Irish. So he changed his name to Temple Fucks the Irish.
I don't remember that.
You did this.
This
100%
was a mistake.
happens.
Xavier, that was an enormous mistake on your part. Hey, Temple's not worth that, man.
So Xavier's name is Temple Fucks the Irish. Andrew Luck has -3 points at halftime. Like 2 interceptions, a lost fumble, 50 yards of offense. It was a disgraceful half. And we were like mocking Xavier in the chat, said, oh, it's because you changed your name. You know, if you would have just kept your name, you'd be winning. So he's like, okay, fine. Changes his name back in the app at halftime to the Luck of the Irish. Andrew Luck puts up like a 25-point second half, and Xavier wins the game by 5 because of it.
It's real. We'd like to pretend it's not real, but it is unfortunately real.
And if it's not, at least it gives us a form of escapism.